Hi guys, it's Ruhi, and today we are talking about the SVB collapse, which is the Silicon Valley Bank. It is Monday, March the 13th, and on Friday, we experienced our first bank collapse after over a decade. So the last bank collapse was in 2008, and I have had a lot of conversations this past weekend about what that means. And I wanted to really simplify what a bank collapse means and essentially just go back to the basics. What happens when you deposit funds into a bank account? Well, essentially, you are putting your money into a money pool. And putting your money in a bank is putting it into a money pool where you are allowing the bank to use your assets. Your assets become a liability for the bank, but you are allowing them to invest 90% of your funds into either creating loans or an investment. And then there is a rule that only 90% of the assets can be used, and they still need to have about a 10 to 11% reserve held at the financial institution. And that rate is actually set by the Fed. So essentially, as a depositor, I put my funds into a financial institution. Those funds become a liability for that financial institution. They need to take those funds and try to make them an asset. They can use 90% of the funds and have 10% of reserves in the bank. Now, your money essentially can be owed by the bank to you at any point. So it's due on demand. But they do have the option of taking that and turning it into an asset. So they can create loans, with your funds. They can invest your funds. And in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, they used the funds and they invested those funds into government bonds. And if the value of those assets suddenly plummet for some reason, then you are in a position, the bank is in a position to become what is called illiquid. Now, let's think back to 2008. The assets, which were mortgage-backed securities, which is what all the lenders were investing in, plummeted as the real estate market plummeted. And all of a sudden, they became insolvent. They were not able to come up with more assets to restore the 90% of funds that were owed to the consumer. In the case of Silicon Valley Bank, what ended up happening was they used 90% of the funds and they put them in government bonds, in US bonds. And as we all know, as interest rates go up and bonds come down, and what the government's been doing lately, the US government has been raising interest rates, and not just raising them slowly, they've been spiking them, and they have been just doing all sorts of crazy things. And that caused the government bonds to decrease in value. And when they decrease in value, and they decrease quite significantly, at that point, SVB went out to their investors to come up with the funds for their depositors. And if the investors decided not to deposit or to add investments into SVB, that is referred as being illiquid, or pardon me, that is considered being insolvent. So essentially what happens is, if they can't find someone to provide the funds, the regulatory, this is considered illiquid. So essentially, if the financial institution can't find investors, then that's considered being illiquid. And if that continues and they can't meet their obligations to their depositors, then they are considered insolvent. And that's when the regulators will step in. And in this case, SVB took all their deposits and they invested the majority of them into the Treasury securities with massive rate hikes and interest rates going up. Essentially, it caused the market of the value of the bonds to crater. And when that happened, SVB could not bridge the gap. So they went to the investors, they asked for assistance. Now, whether that got leaked because they didn't have NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, or whether they got tipped by some of the depositors when they were trying to take out their cash, that they couldn't take out cash. Who knows what really ended up happening and how it created this panic with the depositors who started making bank runs. But essentially, that is kind of a simple version of what happened to SVB. So essentially, the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which was created in the wake of the Great Depression when 9,000 banks went out of business because there was a lot of panic in the market, as well as, in both with the financial institutions as well as the stock market. Depositors decided to pull out their funds, which created these 9,000 banks to crash and 9 million savings accounts to essentially go away. The FDIC was essentially created, which allows you to have $250,000 of funds in a bank account in each financial institution that is protected by the Fed. Now, what you have to understand is that a lot of the funds that were deposited at Silicon Valley Bank were that of startups. So companies like Shopify, Roku, and many, many others. And what has happened is that a lot of these funds are over the FDIC limits of $250K per account per financial institution. So essentially, the FDIC, which stands for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was established during the Great Depression when 9,000 banks went out of business and 9 million savings accounts were essentially wiped out. That's how the FDIC was born after the Great Depression, I believe 1933. So essentially, what Janet Yellen and the Fed decided to do was make an announcement that they were going to bail out the people who had the accounts rather than the bank, which I'm not going to take a stance on whether that's right or wrong. But remember that these startups have employees who need to be paid. These employees have families, mortgages, other debt. So was it the right decision or the wrong decision? In my opinion, it had to be done because we would be seeing a huge effects of them not being bailed out. You have to understand that 80% of the consumers who banked at Silicon Valley Bank or the startups that banked there had over the FDIC insured amount in their accounts. So essentially, 80% of the people had more than 250,000 in the accounts. And if these startups went belly up, then that would have an exact domino effect on their families and on the economy. So was it the right decision? For now, I'm going to say it was. Now, Since Friday, we've had two other financial institution collapse. Is it 9,000 like what we saw in the Great Depression? No. But what caused the 9,000 banks in the Great Depression to crash? Well, consumers started getting losing their confidence with these institutions and started pulling out their cash. So essentially, they did bank runs, and they started investing money in gold and other tangible assets. Now, if you ask me, as most of you know, I am a real estate broker. I'm a real estate investor. So for me, if my clients come to me and they tell me that they've got, more than 250,000 sitting in the bank, the first thing I tell them is why, or ask them is why. Why do you have that kind of money sitting in the bank? That makes absolutely no sense. You need to have between 6 to 12 months of reserves. You've got to have your, stock or your investment or your 401k portfolio. That's separate. But you also need to be able to have tangible assets like gold, like real estate. And so, I understand these companies were startups that had money at SVB, but at the same time, you want to be able to diversify and have items that are tangible. And frankly, the last few months of what we've heard from the Fed is enough for me personally to really think about my own financial education, my own financial fortitude, and rely on myself. You see, one minute we are having or heading into a recession. The next minute, we're not heading into a recession. One minute, we're okay with having interest rates go up a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, interest rates are going to go up here. So, there should not be a panic in the market, but definitely you've got to think about what you're doing if you've got over that FDIC 250 amount in your account. Now, there are things that are not covered by the FDIC, like insurance, stocks, those kinds of things. But if you do have liquid cash in your account, you do need to reconsider if you've got funds over that 250 amount in there. I am a firm believer that you do need to diversify, but I'm also a firm believer that you need to have reserves. So you need to do both. But seeing SVB collapse, they had locations in 13 countries, including Canada, UK, China, Denmark, Germany, India, Israel, and Sweden. So what does that mean to these other countries? I don't know, but I do know what I am seeing worldwide. I'm seeing what's happening in London. I'm seeing what's happening in China and other parts of Europe. I really do believe that we are headed for somewhat of an unstable time. And if you have funds, I would certainly consider putting them in tangible assets. If, again, they're in gold or in real estate, I'd prefer that than storing money at home or in your mattress or in a safe. At least you've got a tangible asset. And right now, as you know, interest rates are going up. So before they go up any further, it might be a smart strategy to put them into some real estate funds and real estate portfolio. I hope this helps. I hope you got a better idea of what happened with SVB. I know that Signature Bank in New York has also closed down, and there is one other financial institution. I know that the Fed has taken over at SVB, and they are essentially relinquishing all their assets to be able to pay for the consumers who have accounts there, as well as add, obviously, whatever else they need. What does that mean to the rest of us? Is there going to be a financial impact? Is there going to be repercussions with the Fed bailing out SVB? Of course, but we don't know what that means right now. And if someone says there are no repercussions, I don't believe them. So I hope this helps. I will continue to inform you as I get more information and I wrap my own head around it. For now, I hope this helps. And please make sure if you like this to like and subscribe. I appreciate you. Bye for now.